In Peru, a prosecutor asked the court to send presidential candidate Keiko Fujimori back to prison for systematically violating the conditions of her parole. The prosecution is seeking a 30-year sentence against her for leading a criminal gang. Thousands of Greeks marched in Athens against government plans to reform labour laws. The Israeli occupation security forces assassinated 2 members of the Palestinian Authority's military intelligence during a pre-dawn raid. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm Katrina Goss. While Peruvian presidential hopeful Keiko Fujimori is busy trying to distort the results of Sunday's elections, a prosecutor asked the court to send her back to prison for systematically violating the conditions of her parole. The prosecution is seeking a 30-year sentence against Fujimori for leading a criminal gang. Fujimori was freed on parole in May 2020 with a number of restrictions. On Thursday, prosecutor José Domingo Pérez asked an organised crime court to revoke Fujimori's parole and remand her in custody for allegedly having met with a witness in a pending corruption case against her. She has systematically failed to comply with the rule of conduct of not communicating with witnesses, the prosecutor said. The right-wing politician is accused of having taken money from the Brazilian construction giant Odebrecht to fund her previous presidential bids in 2011 and 2016. Fujimori was illegally allowed to contest for this year's elections as she had not yet been convicted of a crime. Under Peruvian law, an election victory would see the charges suspended until after her term, but defeat would see her go back to trial. And with virtually 100% of ballots accounted for and an advantage of around 70,000 votes over far-right candidate Keiko Fujimori, leftist Pedro Castillo has still not been officially proclaimed president-elect of Peru. Meanwhile, Fujimori is attempting to have 200,000 votes annulled, alleging fraud with no proof whatsoever. All international observer missions have denied any significant irregularities witnessed in the process. The difference between Castillo and Fujimori now stands at just over 70,000 ballots. On Tuesday evening, Castillo briefly addressed hundreds of supporters who have been gathering on a permanent basis in front of his Free Peru Party headquarters in Lima, awaiting the final results. Meanwhile, Peru's Congress sessioned on Wednesday to begin debates on 12 constitutional reform bills and what analysts and political sectors decried as a clear attempt to block an eventual Pedro Castillo administration. Argentina's President Alberto Fernandez has officially recognized Pedro Castillo as president-elect of Peru. In a tweet, he noted that he had communicated with Castillo, whom he referred to as the president-elect of Peru. He informed that he had expressed his desire to join efforts in favor of Latin America, noting that Argentina and Peru are deeply twinned nations. He also congratulated the Peruvian people for the democratic exercise. Another demonstrator killed and over 50 wounded is the balance of Colombia's 43rd day of national strike mobilizations. Heavy repression took place in the cities of Cali, Bogotá and Medellin on Wednesday. One protester was reported dead in Cali in the course of a demonstration. In Medellin, the National University's Mines faculty, students, professors and staff gathered Wednesday for a peaceful mobilization to commemorate the Day of the Fallen Student in the framework of the national strike. Later, the protesters joined other groups marching through Medellin's downtown. They also protested against police brutality outside the Aburrá Valley Police Command. The mobilization was attacked by security forces with an initial toll of 23 injured, most of them due to burns, lacerations and asphyxia, according to the alternative media outlet Colombian Informa on Twitter. In Yamasa, in southern Bogotá, the security forces charged against protesters. Social movements in support of the protest announced that the medical mission installed in the vicinity of Portal Americas, also in Bogotá, was attacked with gunfire on Wednesday night. Repressive acts were also staged in the capital area of Suba and in urban centres of Popayán, Pasto, Bucaramanga, among other Colombian regions. The government of Dominica has signed an agreement with a Quebec firm to launch construction of the Caribbean island's international airport. In signing the agreement, Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerrit stated that this date would be remembered as when Dominica took a bold step towards realizing an extraordinary transformation for the citizens of a remarkable country. Tourism is the main source of income for the Eastern Caribbean island, with a population of just some 70,000. The airport was one of Skerrit's main campaign promises in the elections held in December 2019. The project will take 5 years for completion.
The construction project will be executed in 5 phases, valued at just over $1 billion Eastern Caribbean dollars, and is expected to be completed within 5 years. It will be built to meet the new resilience construction standards in this country. We are not just building for today, but for the future, and to survive natural disasters.
The indigenous and rural workers of Cotopaxi in Ecuador are resisting the imposition of soaring fuel prices. The movements hope to join forces with the transport sector. Our correspondent Denise Herrera brings us more details from Quito.
The economic situation left by former President Lenín Moreno continues to be under scrutiny. Different sectors have carried out several actions against the fuel price ban established by Moreno, which progressively removed the gasoline subsidy. Part of the country's indigenous organizations announced the first mobilization 2 weeks after President Guillermo Lazo's inauguration.
We reject the progressive fuel price increase that has raised fuel prices by 3 to 5%. It has been said that we must wait for the government, but the prices do not wait, and they are suffocating us in this economic reality. That is why we demand the repeal of this plan and to call all sectors to be able to put together a project on the subsidy policy.
Meanwhile, the government announced the first approach with the transportation sector, with which it has agreed to hold technical meetings to study gasoline pricing schemes.
We are starting today to form this committee, and we will give the names of the persons who will be members, and next Monday we will have the first meeting with the President to analyze item by item. We will be focused on fuel prices for these technical meetings. We are not asking for any benefit, or rather to respect the legal safety of transportation.
The Minister of Finance has different priorities. In his first statements, he assured that he is working on the vaccination plan as a priority to reactivate the economy, and pointed out that new measures will be announced soon.
This government's priority is the massive vaccination plan that is underway, and for which the Minister of Finance has been working hard to fund the plan. We want an economy open to foreign investment.
According to official data, Moreno left the country with a 7.8% national product drop in real terms. In December 2020, poverty at national level reached 32.4%, and until April 2021, the quality of employment continued to fall. Adequate employment was estimated at just 32.6%. Thus, leaving the remaining 2/3 of the economically active population is in a situation of informality or precariousness.
Denise Herrera, TeleSUR, Quito, Ecuador.
More than 200 people seeking to cross into the United States were found on Wednesday in 2 homes in the border city of Ciudad Juárez in northern Mexico. The asylum seekers, most of them from Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Ecuador, Brazil and Mexico, have been locked up and crammed together for more than a month, according to Mexican authorities. The local police reported that the group included 16 children and 3 pregnant women. In April alone, some 178 asylum seekers were apprehended at the border, mostly Central Americans, representing the highest number in 20 years, according to the US authorities. Despite relaxing some of the harsh immigration policies of his predecessor, US President Joe Biden is trying to discourage people from travelling to the country through agreements with regional governments. His Vice President, Kamala Harris, visited both Guatemala and Mexico this week, promising financial aid to boost economies. Massive migration has been the result of the collapse of economies in the region based on neoliberal policies. And we'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. On Thursday, thousands of Greeks marched in Athens against government plans to reform labour laws, which unions say will undermine workers' rights and let companies bring in longer hours through the back door. The strike called by the country's unions brought public transport to a standstill and kept ferries docked at ports. At least 10,000 people joined the rally outside Parliament, which is expected to vote on the bill this month. The most contentious part of the legislation allows employees to work up to 10 hours on one day and less time on another, but unions fear it will enable employers to force workers to accept longer hours. Some believe the government is seeking to raise the 8-hour working day to 10 hours and scrap the 5-day working week and collective bargaining agreements, as well as make it harder to call strikes.
Our future will become even more bleak. Our only hope will be to leave the country if the labor situation worsens. The workforce won't allow the unions to be dismantled or the people to be destroyed. We will continue fighting until the bill is withdrawn.
On Thursday, United States President Joe Biden met with the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Boris Johnson, on the eve of the Group of Seven summit. This was the two leaders' first face-to-face meeting before the summit, to be held in the English resort of Carbis Bay, Cornwall. Biden and Johnson seek to shore up the so-called special relationship in the wake of Brexit, the British withdrawal from the European Union. The US head of state arrived in the UK for the first stop of a European tour on Wednesday, during which he will meet his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin in Switzerland at the end of his 8-day trip. On Wednesday, at least 11 people, including 8 children, were killed in Mumbai, India, by the collapse of a building attributed to torrential monsoon rains. Authorities in the country's financial capital confirmed that 7 other residents were injured Wednesday night in the collapse of a building located in a slum. Search and rescue operations continued on Thursday to find several missing people trapped in the rubble. Inhabitants of nearby properties, whose conditions appear precarious and dangerous, have been evacuated due to the persistent downpour. Collapses of poorly constructed buildings in India are frequent during the monsoon season, accounting for dozens of fatalities every year.
At about 11:30, when I came back from work and started cooking, all of a sudden the bricks started falling on me. I started screaming and the neighbors rushed in to rescue me. I had lost consciousness by the time my children had taken me to the clinic. When I regained consciousness, my children told me that, "Mom, our shanty has collapsed and we have nowhere to stay."
This is a slum area, and the shanties are built on top of each other. Some of the residents have made houses which are 3 stories high and even 4 stories. The 3- and 4-story shanties, which did not have proper support, collapsed. The one with support did not.
And we move now to South Korea, where according to officials at least 9 people were killed when a 5-story building that was being demolished suddenly collapsed, crushing a bus. The bus, which had stopped in front of the site, was carrying 17 people when the accident occurred in a city southwest of the capital, Seoul. According to the National Fire Agency, 9 of the passengers were killed and the remaining 8 were all seriously injured. All the workers on the demolition site had been evacuated before the collapse. Authorities stated that the cause of the accident is not yet clear and that the police are investigating the case. The largest peacetime disaster in South Korea involved the collapse of a department store in 1995, when more than 500 people were killed. This Thursday in Australia, a man was found dead in a submerged car after floods hit the southeast part of the country. Authorities stated that parts of the country have been experiencing strong winds, snow and rainfall, with downpours in the Gippsland region causing fast-rising floodwaters. Victoria State Police said the circumstances surrounding the man's death are being investigated. They also issued an evacuation order to people in nearby low-lying areas. In March, torrential downpours caused fast flooding across eastern Australia, damaging thousands of homes. Scientists have warned that the country, which suffered devastating bushfires in 2019 and 2020, can expect more frequent and more extreme weather events as a result of climate change.
We know the Dandenong Ranges and the Yarra Ranges will keep...
The World Health Organization's Europe Director warned on Thursday that the highly transmissible COVID-19 strain first identified in India is about to take hold in the region, as many countries prepare to ease restrictions and allow more social gatherings and travel across borders.
This week, some 36 countries out of 53 are easing restrictions due to declining COVID-19 cases. whilst we should all recognize the progress made across most countries in the region, we must also acknowledge that we are by no means out of danger. With increasing social gatherings, greater population mobility, and large festivals and sports tournaments taking place in the coming days and weeks, WHO Europe calls for caution.
This Thursday, the European Parliament urged the European Union to reverse its position and support a proposed temporary lifting of intellectual property rights for COVID-19 vaccines, backing a push by many developing nations. The resolution stated that only a fraction of the 11 billion shots needed to vaccinate 70% of the world's population has been produced, and that relying on pledges of excess doses from richer nations is not enough. Industrialised nations home to large pharmaceutical companies have resisted the release of patents, arguing that a waiver would not boost production and could undermine future research and development on vaccines and therapeutics. "90% of African countries might miss the target of vaccinating a tenth of their population by September for lack of jabs," the World Health Organization's Director for Africa warned.
There is a global push to fully vaccinate 10% of the population in every country by September. And to reach this goal, Africa needs an extra 225 million doses. This will really require a massive effort, as our early projections indicate that without a significant boost in the availability of vaccines, only 7 African countries will achieve this goal.
This Thursday, Argentina's lower house debates a draft bill on epidemiological controls. The pandemic law was sent to Congress by the national government and has already been approved by the Senate. The hope is that it will be approved by Friday, when the current restrictions in place to address the coronavirus expire. The bill would allow regional authorities to enforce local restrictions in areas with low COVID infection and death rates. The national government would continue to establish restrictions in areas with a larger number of cases per 100,000 inhabitants. The measure is intended to speed up decision-making and, above all, the application of urgent measures. It also seeks to avoid the government having to issue an emergency decree every time restrictions are required to tackle the spread of the virus. The bill comes almost a month after the local government of Buenos Aires, in dispute with the national government, announced the reopening of schools, despite the surge in COVID cases, leading teachers to take strike action. And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. The Israeli occupation security forces assassinated 2 members of the Palestinian Authority's military intelligence during a pre-dawn raid. The 2 intelligence officers were killed during an Israeli forces raid in the city of Jenin in search of wanted Palestinians, one of whom was also killed in the shooting. Israeli special forces dressed in civilian clothing attempted to detain wanted Palestinians outside the headquarters of the Palestinian Military Intelligence Unit headquarters in the northern West Bank city. A 3rd member of the intelligence forces was critically injured in the shooting. A general strike in the district of Jenin was called on Thursday to mourn the latest Palestinians killed by Israeli gunfire. This Thursday, China approved a new law that protects its firms from foreign sanctions as it looks to build up its defences against rising United States pressure. The law seeks to safeguard China's sovereignty and dignity, a Foreign Ministry spokesperson explained.
In order to firmly safeguard the country's sovereign dignity and core interests and oppose Western hegemonism and power politics, the Chinese government has announced many times that the relevant entities and individuals of the countries who are introducing sanctions will be subjected to corresponding countermeasures. At the same time, we also think that it is necessary for the state to formulate a special anti-foreign sanctions law to provide strong legal protection and support for China's counter-discriminatory measures against foreign countries. As for whether such a law will affect the relations between China and other countries, I think such concern is completely unnecessary.
At least 4 million people are being threatened with severe hunger in the war-torn state of Tigray in northern Ethiopia. The United Nations World Food Programme said that 350,000 of them are facing famine. The UN World Food Programme has swiftly mounted an emergency food assistance operation, deploying more additional staff and increasing food distributions to reach 1.4 million people, approximately half of the number of people in need. The lack of information on people's food security in Western Tigray is also deeply worrying. Other agencies are also struggling to reach many much of the rest of Tigray's Hungary, as humanitarian access is still being blocked by armed groups. The ability of people to access vital services in the country and for the World Food Programme to reach them with food assistance is essential to avoid a catastrophe, the programme said. On Thursday, Sri Lanka announced an investigation into a possible oil slick reported off its west coast, where container ships sank after burning for 13 days. The Coast Conservation Minister stated that local experts were asked to examine an oil patch where the Express Pearl ran aground earlier this month. The vessel reported an onboard acid leak and caught fire as it was just about to enter the port of Colombo. The owners of the ship have already deployed representatives from the International Tanker Owners Pollution Federation to monitor any oil spill and help with the cleanup of beaches. Sri Lankan environmentalists last week filed a lawsuit against the government and the ship's operators for allegedly failing to prevent what they called the worst marine disaster in the country's history. In Iran, the presidential election campaign is in full steam. A second debate between candidates was held this week. Polls are due on June 18th. The debate took place on Tuesday and was attended by the 7 candidates to the presidency. Social, cultural and political issues were the focus of the discussion, including the need to achieve the lifting of the unilateral and illegal sanctions imposed on the country by the United States. The candidates also called for improved trade with 15 neighbouring countries and progress in building a more inclusive society. A solar eclipse will be visible over the Earth's northern hemisphere on Thursday, with parts of Canada and Siberia privy to the best view. The eclipse will be partial, which means the people in its shadow won't be plunged into daytime darkness. Instead, people with the maximum visibility and necessary protective eyewear will have a few minutes to glimpse the moon's silhouette encircled by the sun. In northwest Canada, northern Russia, northwest Greenland and the North Pole, the sun will be 88% obscured by the moon. The eclipse will be partly visible to observers in Northwest America, parts of Europe including France and the UK, and some of Northern Asia. And we've come to the end of this news brief, but remember you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also follow us on social media for all the latest news. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Telegram, plus you can catch up on our shows on our YouTube channel. For TeleSUR English, I'm Katrina Goss. Thank you for watching.